Hello, Dr. Tracy Pano here. I'm going to be talking today about our community ethnography. Now you might be wondering, what is a community ethnography? Well, we're going to explain that today. Essentially, for youth evangelism, it really is going back to understanding our audience, understanding the receiver of the message. When we look at our communication model that we've talked about a few weeks ago, it's being able to understand those people, that community that's going to be receiving the message, and being able to put the message into the medium, the media, that's going to best get the message across in the clearest, most understandable way. So we're going to be looking at a community ethnography, and we're going to look at specifically the assignment for this course in preparing a community ethnography of your community. That can be your city, or it could be your neighborhood. It could be the neighborhood of your church or your ministry, or perhaps you're at a place where you're wanting to do something new. You're wanting to go into a new area, a new community, a new neighborhood, a new city. This will give you a chance to do some of the preliminary work of doing a community ethnography for that. So the first task is going to be identifying your community. Of course, because this is a youth evangelism class, I want to focus on young people, middle school, high school, college age, young adult, that demographic within your geographic community, your city, your neighborhood, whatever it is that you're going to be singling out to take a closer look at. Now, of course, when we look at community ethnography, and ethnography is observing people's behavior in their own environment so that you can get a holistic understanding of their world. To do an ethnography, we're going to move from seeing ourselves as ministers or pastors or volunteer leaders, even beyond looking at it as evangelists, but we're going to be looking at ourselves as sociologists. We're going to look at the science of looking and observing people, seeing them in their context and their environments. I'm hopeful that if you are interested, or if you've been involved in working with youth, that you've been on their turf. You've been in their schools, or you've been to their school activities and events, or you've been to where they hang out. You observe them in their, so to speak, natural habitat. And that's what an ethnography really is doing. Now, if you wanted to study somebody who was really into skateboarding, either a male or a female who was a skateboarder, you could invite them into a laboratory, you could sit them down at a table, and you can have a series of questions that you want to ask them, and to find out about what makes them click. Why are they so interested in skateboarding? How important is skateboarding in their lives, and what it is that makes that connection, and for them to be engaged in that. Well, that's one way to do the science of ethnography, but it's also good to be able to go to a skate park. Maybe spend some time there observing and interacting with those that are there, or watching them in their natural habitat, watching them interact with their peers and learning new tricks and having fun, and maybe even getting in arguments or fights or conflicts, whatever's going on, and you're observing what's happening. And you can get an insight into what makes them tick. What engages them in skateboarding? Why is it so important? Why is it part of their life, and how is it part of their life? So that's essentially what we're doing when we are doing an ethnography. We are discovering meaning. Everything that we can observe, we can discover meaning. For example, what they wear, the clothing of the typical youth is going to be different based on where you're looking at and who you're looking at. The parts of the city or the particular neighborhoods, perhaps an ethnic group or a socioeconomic strata in your community. The way that they dress and what they wear will mean something completely different. For some, even wearing the same thing could mean something different. In one neighborhood, it might be a sign of involvement or a sign that you are one of us. And in another neighborhood, you wear that same outfit and it's you are not one of us. You are not like us. You dress differently than us. So we discover meaning in what they wear, the type of music they listen to, the type of activities that they are involved in, the television shows they watch, the movies they watch, their hobbies, the sports they're interested in or are not interested in. All of that is helping to discover meaning for the particular socioeconomic group that you're looking at, or the socio group demographic that you are looking at. It also helps us understand norms. What is it that makes that group unique? Young people or a specific clique within the young people in that group. You are going to understand the norms, and you're also going to be able to identify barriers. One of the things that I like to do with ethnography is do what is called a sociogram. A sociogram is a visual representation of some of the aspects that you're observing. One of my favorite ones to do is I'll have young people or high schoolers do it for their own high school, or if you are a youth worker and you have access to the local high school, one of the best ways I'll have them do is say, draw your school cafeteria. And in your school cafeteria, identify where the various groups eat lunch. And they'll draw the tables and who sits where, and you'll even get some of them that will include the outliers, maybe those that don't eat lunch and they head off campus, or they eat lunch in a specific classroom or area, maybe the band room or the choir room or the auditorium and the stage if they're into drama, things like that. And they'll identify where they eat lunch, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper. But that drawing of the school cafeteria represents a sociogram. You can do that in a variety of ways. You can do that with a map. You can draw the community, or you can get a map of your community and identify school districts. That's a sociogram, or zip codes. Or you can even go deeper with the data and find socioeconomic figures and find out where the higher income families live and the lower income families. And you can identify some of the perks of living in the higher income neighborhoods versus those living in the lower incomes. Those are all sociograms. And it's all part of doing this ethnography where we're discovering meaning, understanding the norms, identifying the barriers of what's going on in the community that we wish to observe. Not until something is understood can communication become powerful. We want the message to become powerful. Why should you study your community? There are several reasons. I'm going to list several reasons that I think you should put your sociologist glasses on. I don't care. Get a lab coat, a clipboard, and a pen, maybe even some funky glasses, and you go study the community or the young people that way and look like a sociologist. But why should you study your community? There are several reasons. First, to understand community factors that influence ministry effectiveness. Oftentimes we don't understand, or we don't see the barriers that might be there, or the ways that we are just missing because we're not speaking the same language, or they don't consider us part of the insiders. We don't understand the forces that impact the lives of people in the community, which is another reason we should study your community, to understand those forces that influence them. When I was a church planter, I went into a community to plant the church. And as I studied the community, I discovered there were two unique demographics. There was the old part of the community, the old, which were people that had, their families had lived there for several generations. They were largely located in the center of town, which was called the village. And then the outer ring were these suburbs where more wealthy but younger families started moving into the neighborhood. And the old villagers didn't necessarily like the new incoming urban professionals that were now moving into the suburbs that were taking advantage of this quaint little village. And so as a church, as a pastor, I had to decide, how could I minister to both groups? Because if I just said, I'm going to plant in the middle in the village, get an old church building would have been the best, kind of do the traditional kind of things and appeal to the traditional families, I would only have been able to minister to one small demographic of that community. The larger growing part was the younger families, the urban professionals that were moving into the families. But if I were going to reach them and place the church in a more modern building, perhaps maybe taking over an office building and renovating it, which is what we did, we would shut off our appeal to the villagers who really controlled building permits, they controlled the Chamber of Commerce, they controlled the school systems. They were kind of the movers and shakers in the community, but the vast majority and larger growing people were the new urban. I understood that and had to decide, how in the world can we bridge that gap? And especially because one group didn't necessarily appreciate the other group. And it was a unique setting of how we did that. We got involved in the Chamber of Commerce. I got involved in the local Rotary Club to identify with some of that old villager. At the same time, our church was located in the outer ring. We did programming that appealed to young families. But as I was doing that, I was always trying to make sure I was respecting and honoring the villagers who had been there. We would take part in, they would have a big parade and celebration every year that was called Old Village Days. And we would have a booth there where it wasn't an evangelistic booth. It wasn't, hey, come look at our church. But it was a food booth where we just provided food. As a matter of fact, it was Cajun food that we provided. We had a family in our church that cooked Cajun, and we would have a crawfish boil. And we'd have, the community we became known as the church that did the crawfish boil at the village days. And so that we tried to make inroads into both demographic groups. As you study your community, what are ways that you can overcome barriers, that you can identify them and overcome them? You also, it helps to guide strategic planning and ministry. It helps you make plans for what ministries would be effective and what ministries wouldn't be effective. What ways of outreach or to be able to engage people in your community, especially those young people in your community, and what won't. To identify community resources, vision, motivations, needs, and priorities. Find out what makes that community proud. And then you become a champion of that. What is their village or their vision for growth? What do they want to see happen in their community? Can you come along and walk alongside them and add value to what they value? At the same time, how can they and the resources of your community contribute to achieving the vision that you have? For example, I think anybody who is interested in ministering to young people in a community needs to be connected with the local school systems. They need to be adding value, even if that is merely showing up at the football games, the basketball games, the choir concerts, the musicals, the dramas, the various aspects. It might be volunteering with the parent organizations, or volunteering to clean up after events or activities, or bringing food into the teachers on parent-teacher conferences, doing something that engages you and connects you to the community and adds value to what they are doing, but at the same time they can begin to see value in having you as part of their community. To be able to discern the role religion, faith, and the church plays in that particular community. How important is church? How important is faith? And for young people, more and more, we cannot assume that young people are familiar with what goes on in church, or familiar with the message of the gospel. Finding that out, and to what degree. What do they do on the times you normally or typically do your service? As a youth pastor of a pretty large youth group in the community, I discovered that my Wednesday night youth services were up in the summer and went down during the school year, especially different parts of the year. And what I discovered is most of my young people were involved in school. They were involved in the sports teams and in the drama and the various activities and events, and that would pull them away from our midweek service, our Wednesday night service. And so one of the decisions I had to make is, do I guilt them and say, you need to put God first and you need to attend church and try to be a competition to what was going on in school, or do I work with that? And so what I did is I flip-flopped where my youth group met. Instead of meeting on Wednesday nights for our main service, we met on Sunday nights. Because our church didn't have anything going on Sunday nights. There are different things that home groups that might happen on Sunday night. But we decided as a church, and I proposed that we would have our main youth meeting on Sunday night. And then on Wednesday nights, we would have our small groups, or we do various things, whether it was preparing our worship team practice, or getting ready, other groups getting ready for events, or where our youth leaders can engage with our young people in different ways. And we got creative with what we did in the midweek and didn't compete with what was going on with the schools. And we did our midweek because nothing was going on in our community on Sunday night. And so we would do Sunday night with our youth group. We make sure it was early enough and they'd get done early enough where it wouldn't compete with parents wanting them to make sure their homework was done and they were well rested for the school week beginning the next morning. But it made a miraculous difference in how we did ministry in that community. Rather than competing, we celebrated what was going on, and we celebrated the connections and the relationships that we had. Why should you study your community? To identify connections, existing and potential, between the church and the community. I've already mentioned several. We participated in village days and a celebration that the local community did as a church. As a youth group, we made sure we celebrated those students that were involved in the local school, and we celebrated the successes of the teams and the various events and activities, and we tried to help wherever we could. We knew the people that were involved. We looked at what were existing connections and what were potential connections with those in our community. Also, to evaluate how the church impacts the community and vice versa. Does your community even know that your church or that your ministry exists? One of the things that happened again in the community where I was youth pastor at is it happened actually twice while I was youth pastor, where there was a student at the local high school that committed suicide. And one of the first people that the principal called was me. Because they knew me, they knew who I was, they knew our church, and they said, we don't really know what to do or what will happen, but if you can just come to school and be here and be ready just to talk to students and to help them and encourage them, and if you know any of the local pastors and youth pastors, could you call them and get them to come here? They knew me. And it provided an inroad for when there was a need. They called, and I was able to show up and just be there and be an encouragement and be able to minister to students at a time of need. Why should you study your community? Another reason is to discern how your church, or to assess opportunities for ministry. To assess opportunities for ministry and to assist in strategic planning for outreach. You will learn a lot. You will see a lot of opportunity. And usually it's opportunity that we never knew that was there because we never looked. Doing an ethnography, studying your community in a new way, putting new glasses on, will help you see things in a better way. You can look at a community ethnography as a treasure hunt. You are uncovering hidden treasure in your community. What the community values, what young people value, what parents value, what they utilize as resources, what you can utilize as resources, what you can utilize as that common ground, that common field of experience, the context for doing ministry and trying to communicate the gospel. You can create common ground by engaging in your community in effective ways. How do you study your community? What are the nitty-gritties? What are we asking for you to do with this assignment? Let me give you 6 things. First of all, we want you to identify your community. Tell me what city or what neighborhood, or give us the boundary lines. Once you've identified what you're studying, learn the history. Find out what the past has been like. Even what was it like to be a young person, 10 years ago, 20 years ago? What happened in the school systems? What significant events might have played a role in forming what the community is today? Third, gather pertinent and available demographic data. How many teenagers are in your community? What's the population of your local middle schools or high schools? How many middle schools? How many high schools are there? What are the families like? What are the various socioeconomic strata within that community that you're studying? So gather any pertinent demographic information. What's the ethnic makeup? Where are the churches? Is there a synagogue? Is there a mosque? Are there other religions? How many churches? What religions? Is it a predominantly Catholic area or more Protestant? You discover all these things. Where do the youth that go to church, where do they go to church? When do they go to church? Finding out all those things will help you as you want to engage the community. We'll ask you to do your own research. Come up with some of your own questions. Get creative in how you're going to analyze your community. Once you do that, analyze all the data, all the information that you get, draw your conclusions, and draft a plan. That's the basic outline of doing an ethnography. Now we'll add some skin onto those bones. But first I want to let you know, this is biblical. There is biblical precedent to studying your community. Let's go back to Nehemiah. Now remember, Nehemiah was in exile, and this was after both Israel and Judah had been conquered and had gone into exile, and they now are those that had been in exile are coming back, and they find Jerusalem in ruins. The walls had been broken down, the temple had been destroyed, and it grieved them. And Nehemiah sets out to begin rebuilding the walls. The walls of Jerusalem, the first thing, to protect them. And in many ways in ministry, that's what we do for young people. We begin to rebuild walls that have been broken down over the years. And Nehemiah did that. And we find in the first chapter, in Nehemiah chapter 1, Nehemiah begins to rebuild the walls. Here, just the first few verses. The words of Nehemiah, the sons of Hakkalah. Now it happened in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Now, I will say the first step that I would recommend for doing an ethnography is to be burdened for the young people in your community. Begin to pray for them. Weep over them. Cry over them. See their plight. Look at their trouble and their shame. Let the heart of God reach into your heart and be united with your heart so that you can see things as the way God sees them. Begin praying for your community and for the youth of your community. The first step that Nehemiah took was to survey the city. He did an ethnography. In chapter 12, he goes out and he takes he was there for 3 days. He arose one night. He took a few men with him. He told no one but what God had put into his heart to begin the rebuilding process. But he started by walking around the gate, walking around the walls, and walking around the city, and looking and seeing inspecting what was the condition. And that's what I want you to do with this ethnography. I want you to begin to walk through your community, drive through your community, look at the condition, allow God to open your eyes to certain things. The second step Nehemiah did in Nehemiah 2, starting in verse 17, he gave a report of what he found. That's your assignment. You're going to give a report of what you find in your community and in your city. He said, "Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work." And so I hope as you begin to do this ethnography that within you there will be not only that passion, but you will be encouraged, that God will give you the strength and the vision and the motivation to do the work of building the walls, of presenting the gospel to a community that needs to hear it. The third step that Nehemiah did, in Nehemiah chapter 3, starting in verse 1, he began to divide up the task into small parts. In other words, he got strategic. He looked and he saw, here's what needs to be done. I need to be able to take the high priest, and I need them to build the sheep gate, consecrate it. I need to take these men over here, and they need to rebuild the tower. And I need to take these men over here, and they need to begin to rebuild this section. And so you can begin to break down what you're seeing into various tasks. What are the best ways, what are the best avenues to reach and engage the youth of the community that you are studying? So I want you to identify your community. I want you to map your city. Draw up a map of your community. Highlight the boundaries. Do a sociogram of some kind, whether you're drawing circles or squares. You get out a map, or you open up your computer, get Excel, and draw graphs. There's a lot of great tools that you can use by doing that. But I want you to highlight the boundaries. I want you to pinpoint, landmark certain things like churches or schools, hangouts, the parks, the sporting events, the various things that you can do. You can do it by zip code, you can do it by neighborhood, you can do it by school district, census tracts. You can have access to any of that data. It doesn't take much online. You can Google around and you'll be able to find a lot of important information. But the best way you're going to do is do just like Nehemiah did. Get out and walk the city. Observe and see what happens. There are some technology things that you can use. A couple that I've used before. A software that goes along with any Microsoft type software is called Maptitude. Now, it costs to get the software, but you can actually get a free trial. So for this assignment, you could utilize that free trial period and use it for free. Or you can utilize a website entitled Mapping Center for Evangelism and Church Growth, which is mappingcenter.org. You can utilize that information there. I don't know how tech savvy you are. The more tech savvy you are, you can use what you can find. Utilize the tools and resources that are available to you. But you might want to create and map your own. If you need to draw things out by hand and then scan it into your project as a PDF, great, wonderful. You do what you can do. Utilize the tools, the resources that you have, your abilities, and map out what you're discovering about your community, what you're seeing. Learn the history, study your city, look at the city or community website, check out the Chamber of Commerce material, or if there's a tourist office, visit that. State, county, city, local historical societies, museums of any kind, historical landmarks, local library. Of course, there's always Google and Wikipedia. I always say for a scholarly research paper, Google and Wikipedia are not good sources. Anything with a .com usually isn't good to cite as a source in a scholarly educational material. But to get you kick-started, they're good places to look and go down to their bibliography, find out where did their information come from, and then go to those sources to find their primary sources. And that will help get you pointed in the right direction. So if you get stuck, need a good quick start, Google it, go to Wikipedia, use the resources that you have. Look up demographic information as you learn about your city. Place on the map important places and landmarks, your business district and key businesses, key hangouts for young people. Where do they go? What businesses appeal most to the young people? Where are the churches? Where are the schools? Where are the parks? Where do they hang out? Get statistical information from the U.S. Census Bureau. That's all valuable things that can come into contact as you analyze this ethnography and get as much data as you think you can get in the next few weeks. Doing your own research, I've told you should drive and walk through the community, not only praying, but observing, talking to people. Act like a lost tourist. Ask for directions. Find out where people eat. What's your favorite restaurant? What is this community known for? Read those local newspapers, not just the state or the big city newspapers, but those little neighborhood newspapers. Grab some of them and find out what's going on in that community. Look at those ads and the announcements, especially the sports section. What's going on with sports? Eat and shop in the community. Go to the local hangouts instead of going to the chain restaurants. Find out is there any local restaurant that people go to? What coffee shops that people go to that isn't named Starbucks or one of the major brands? Go there. Find out what major thoroughfares are there. Where's the traffic routes within that community? Where do the youth go? Where do the youth go after school? What do they do on the weekends? Where are they hanging out? What's the things to do in that community? And whether that's on a regular basis or maybe it's an annual event or monthly event or something that goes on that draws young people. What are those things? Talk to the people that are local and ask questions. What do you like about your community? What do you like about living or working here? What do you like about your school? What do you like about going to school here? Who's your favorite teacher? What's your favorite subject? What's your community known for? What's your school known for? Who are your rivals? What are the main economic engines of the community? What do people do here for a living? Asking the young people, when you grow up, do you want to live in this community or do you want to get out of this community? Why? Finding those kind of questions. Tell me about the schools, the hangouts, the neighborhoods. All those things help. Identify some of the community leaders. Who are the gatekeepers? The people that control who gets in, who gets to do things, who gives permission, who do you need to know to get anything done in that community? Who are the caretakers? The mamas, maybe the aunts and the uncles, or the shepherds, the people who help, that provide a place for young people to gather, or that the young people look to as mentors and friends. They know they're the people in their community that care. Who are the operators, the movers, the shakers? They're in the know, whether that's for good or for bad. Who are the people within the youth community? Who are the leaders of the various cliques? Who are the acknowledged leaders? That might be the quarterback of the football team, the point guard on the basketball team, the head cheerleader. It might not be. It could be some other reason. It could be if you're in an area where there's gangs, it could be the gang leader. Find out who it is that are the operators and who are the influencers in the community. Who are the people who can elicit change? Who are the power brokers that can make things happen? especially not just in the community, but for you, I want you to focus with the young people. Who are the influencers in your community, among the teenagers, among the middle schoolers, among the high schoolers, among the young adults? And as you do your own research, there's a lot of ways that you have to look. You got to put those new glasses on. Maybe even you have to get some bifocals on so that you can see things up close as well as at a distance. Now, I say that because, well, my age, I need to be able to do that when I read. But you need to be able to see. And so when you're doing your own research, let me give you just a few things to consider. First of all, make sure you look up. Pray. What is God's perspective on your community and upon the young people in your community? What are the spiritual roadblocks? Are there? Is there a spirit about your community? Is there something that goes on or that has gone on in your community that inhibits the work of the gospel or the gospel message getting through? Or is there something that helps the gospel message? Get a perspective from God. Make sure you're praying and seeking His direction. Look around. Pay attention. Describing your community in ways that they describe. Seeing that community in ways that they see them, that outsiders see them. But look around. Look out. Look for problems. What are the needs? Not only the real needs, it might be poverty, or it might be that this community needs to be refurbished, or it might be wealth and materialism is the problem. But what are the problems in the community? What are the needs? The real needs and also the felt needs. What do the young people feel? What is their overarching cry, the cry of their heart? Look back. What is the perspective? Trace the community's history, the school's history, the students' history, the history of the way young people were looked at and have been looked at. Have they been looked at as a problem? Have they been looked at as an asset? Are they looked over? Or are they looked at? What has been the perspective of youth in your community? Look back. And look within yourself, your priorities. What are your strengths and your weaknesses? Why did you choose that community? Why do you have a call to that community or an interest in that community? Why do you want to be an influencer in that community? Look within yourself. Look in the mirror too and discover what is your passion and your call. What has God called you to do in this community? So what is your plan? You're going to analyze, you're going to draw, you're going to draft out the plan. After you've gathered this data, you now look at it and you analyze it. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to write out a brief introduction describing your community. Provide a historical background. List and describe the significant demography that you've discovered. The institutions, including the churches, the schools, the businesses, the leaders, the various socioeconomic demographics, the perceptions, the views, the personality. List those things out as you're beginning to analyze. This isn't your final paper yet. This is just your notes that you're taking. Include a sociogram or any sociograms you might have gone, whether it's here's the school districts, here's the zip codes, or here's the lunchroom at the local high school. Whatever you can utilize, bring those into your notes also. What did you find most significant as you analyze your research? Based on what you discover, what are the most important aspects to know and understand about this community? What questions have you answered? When you went in, you didn't know, and you discovered the answer to, and what questions remain? What do you still need some research to do? Because as you gather some data, it's going to cause you to ask more questions rather than less questions. What would be the ideal location or setting for engaging young people? How would that look in that community? And then I want you to start thinking of and get creative and begin to make recommendations. What model of youth ministry would be most effective in your community? What should be the primary ministry emphasis of youth ministry in that community? What is the best way to engage and attract unchurched youth? You now are the expert in that community. You know where they're at. How do we reach them? What evangelism approach would work best for the youth in your community? And what would be the ideal location or setting for reaching unchurched youth? Your assignment is going to be real simple. Here's what I want you to be able to turn in by the end of this unit. You're going to take all of your notes. It's going to take a lot of work. I understand this. The bulk of your energy and effort for this entire class is going to happen here in this middle section. This is a big project. So I want you to give it attention. I want you to give it time. I want you to, again, you're going to go out and get the data. You're going to sit down and you're going to analyze the data, organize and collect all your notes. And then for the final project that you will submit to me, here's what it is. It will be a 2,000 to 3,000 word, that's an 8 to 10 page report. That needs to be typed, double spaced, so that's why it's about 8 to 10 pages for 2,000 to 3,000 years. That's the text. Make sure you do it in the proper MLA formatting with your name and the name heading up in the upper left-hand corner of that first page, a title of it, which can simply be Community Ethnography, or name that community, this neighborhood's ethnography, and then begin to give me that report, 2,000 to 3,000 words. In addition, utilize and develop any graphic and appendices that you might have. So those sociograms you created, clean them up, get them in a nice order, and put them at the end of this report. In addition to the 8 to 10 pages of written text, give me your sociograms and your maps, maybe pictures, some kind of visual representation of your community that you're studying. I want you to answer some questions. Who are the youth in your community? Where are they? What are they like? Why are they like they are? How can you best share the gospel with them? This is your conclusions. As you're coming to your conclusion, this is where I want you to get. And I want you to provide a theological, demographical, and methodological rationale for all your conclusions. This is a big task. This community ethnography is really a central part to this class because it's going to give you insight. It's going to provide methods and vision for reaching young people in a specific community. I'm looking forward to seeing what work you do and reading your report. As I read these reports, trust me, I also pray for your community, I pray for your ministry, and I pray for inroads. Thank you, good luck, do a good job, put the work in. We'll see you next time.